Today, we are going to do the character study of Joseph. The character study of Joseph. And as we know, Joseph is a great grandson of our father of faith. Who is our father of faith? Abraham. Very good. Let's have somebody read for us Genesis chapter 37.
Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flock, and his brothers, his sons of Bilhah, and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to him, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of corn out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood up upright, while your sheaves gathered round mine and bowed down to it." His brother said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bound down to me." When he told his father as well and as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind.
In the footsteps of Jesus, we see Joseph, a young boy of 17 years old. Can you imagine? Boy was 17 years, anatumwa na babake, and then he goes running to the fields to check on his brothers. Hello? That is obedience, isn't it? That is obedience. And so I've divided my lesson in 4 scenarios. As we walk in the footsteps of Jesus, I have 4 scenarios that I've divided this lesson. And the 4 scenarios are in the presence of God, in the presence of God in the pit. I'm going very slowly because I want everybody to get it. In the pit, in Potiphar's house, in prison, and in the palace. How many P's are those? Joseph in the pit, in Potiphar's house, in prison, and in the palace. And we have seen, if somebody can read for us, Natalie, you're to take the lesson 2.
We are going to read from the book of Genesis 7:12 to 36, and it says, "One day when Joseph's brother had gone to Shechem to take care of their father's flock, Jacob said to Joseph, 'I want you to go to Shechem where your brother are taking care of the flock.' Joseph answered, 'I am ready.' His father said, 'Go and see if your brothers are safe and if the flock is all right. Then come back and tell me.' So his father sent him on his way from the valley of Hebron. Joseph arrived at Shechem and was wandering about in the country when a man saw him and asked him, 'What are you looking for?' 'I am looking for my brothers who are taking care of their flock,' he answered. 'Can you tell me where they are?' The man said, 'They have already left. I heard them say that they were going to Dothan.' So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan, and they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted against him and decided to kill him. They said to one another, 'Here comes that dreamer. Come on now, let's kill him and throw his body into one of the dry wells. We can say that a wild animal killed him. Then we will see what becomes of his dreams.' Reuben heard them and tried to save Joseph. 'Let's not kill him,' he said. Just throw him into this well in the wilderness, but don't hurt him. He said this, planning to save him from them and send him back to his father. When Joseph came up to his brothers, they ripped off his long robe with full sleeves. Verse 24, then they took him and threw him into the well, which was dry. While they were eating, they suddenly saw a group of Ishmaelites traveling from Gilead to Egypt. Their camels were loaded with spices and raisins. Judah said to his brothers, What will we gain by killing our brother and covering up the murder? Let's sell him to these Ishmaelites. Well, then we won't have to hurt him. After all, he's our brother and our own flesh and blood. His brothers agreed. And when some Midianite traders came by there, the brothers pulled Joseph out of the well and sold him by 20 pieces of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben came back to the well and found that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes in sorrow. He turned to his brothers and said, "The boy is not there. What am I going to do?" Then they killed a goat and dipped Joseph's robe in its blood. They took the robe to their father and said, "We found this. Does it belong to your son?" He recognized it and said, "Yes, it is his. Some wild animals has killed him. My son Joseph had been torn to pieces." Jacob tore his clothes in sorrow and put on a sackcloth. He mourned for his son a long time. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "I will go down to the world of the dead, still mourning for my son." So he continued to mourn for his son Joseph. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the Midianites had sold Joseph to Potiphar, one of the king's officers, who was the captain of the palace guard. That's the end of our reading.
We've heard the story, the whole story, but one thing that came out for me about Joseph, as much as he was obedient, kalikuanga na kamushene. He was telling on the others. And the brothers didn't like him because of that. And the other thing, he was really loved by the father. Remember, he was the son of Rachel, who made Jacob work for 14 years to get her for marriage, isn't it? So you remember that story of Jacob working for 14 years in order to get Rachel, okay? Because initially, he was given who? He was given Leah. And Leah was not so beautiful. And so when he realized that he's been given Leah, he decided, I still want Rachel. And so he had to work for another 7 years. And so you can imagine, this Joseph was the son of the beloved Rachel. And so he was the dad's favorite. No wonder the others were going to the fields to tend for the floor, but Joseph was remaining home with the father. And he was loved by the father. The father had made for him a coat of many colors, a beautiful one. Yani akivaa alikuwa anakaa kama Christmas tree. Si Christmas tree inakuanga beautiful. So Joseph akivaa hiyo coat alikuwa anakaa kama nini? Kama Christmas tree. And so he's sent by the father to go and check on his brothers who were already on the fields. And he went because he was an obedient boy. But now sasa our brothers walikuanga wanasema, "Oh, this one is here." Walikuanga wamemwekea wanted because he used to tell on them. Wakifanya kitu anakimbia. Si mnajua kuna wale watoto wadhito, and I don't think nyinyi ni watu wadhito. Ati mami, huyu alifanya. That was Joseph for you. And so the brothers hated him. And the fact that he was loved more by the father, the brothers hated him. And so they got an opportune time to kill him. Kwanza amekuja na ametumwa tu waangalie how they are faring on, whether they need anything, whether they are hungry, whether the flocks are okay. But Joseph innocently goes out to look for them. And he's directed where they are. And so when he gets there, they hatch a plot to do what? To kill them. But I think because of that upbringing that these children of Jacob had, that they feared God, a thought came that they want to kill him. But another thought came, after all, he is our brother. Let us do what? Let us throw him in the pit. But then again, uongo ikaingia. Because what did they do? They slaughtered a goat, they covered his coat of many colors with the blood of the goat, and they went and they lied to their father. Anyone walking in the footsteps of Jesus, do they tell lies? These ones didn't walk in the footsteps of Jesus, isn't it? Because they told lies, and their father was so heartbroken. Jacob was so heartbroken because his favorite son has been killed. But deep down he felt, ni kama hajakufa. He would feel something. Si unajua kala kitu una feel, I think si ukweli. I think kuna kauongo mahali. So Jacob mourned the son, and he lived with a broken heart for a very long time. And luckily for Joseph, once he was thrown in the pit, God's presence was with him. Guess what happened? They did not kill him. They sold him to the Midianites, who were merchants, and they were going to Egypt. There was slave trade then. So people were sold as slaves. And Jacob was sold for 20 shekels. 10 less what Jesus was sold. You remember Jesus was sold for 30 shekels? Joseph was sold for 20 shekels. And now we see Joseph in Potiphar's house, because the Midianites went and resold him to Potiphar. Potiphar was a big person in the government. I think alikuwa kama CS hivi. Sijui alikuwa wa ministry gani. But he was a big person in the government of Pharaoh. The leader of Egypt then was Pharaoh. Now, when they sold him to Potiphar's wife, God's presence again was with Joseph. Can you imagine? You've been sold as a slave, but you have been made in charge of everything in that house. Hello? Isn't that God's favor? And we are going to have 3 lessons from those experiences, those 4 experiences. And we find that God's presence and favor was with Joseph, even on the pit and in Potiphar's house. We realized that Potiphar's wife wanted to go to bed with Joseph. Hello? Mama na yeye alikuwa kichwa gumu, si ndio? Alikuwa kihangaika, kimama kibaya. And there is somewhere in Genesis chapter 39, if you can turn with me to Genesis chapter 39. Genesis chapter 39, we find Joseph being entrusted with everything in Potiphar's house. But when it came to Potiphar's wife, Joseph said something. And in verse number, I think it's verse number 6. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well-built and handsome. Hey, Joseph was handsome. Boys, do you hear that? Joseph was handsome. Remember, he was 17 years old. Na ni kimtu kiko built. Can you imagine? Can you figure that picture? Uone kimtu handsome, And then this Potiphar's wife, I don't even know what was wrong with her. Because the husband was rich, isn't it? What do you want to do? Why do you want to go to bed with a 17-year-old? This was Potiphar's wife. Because she was not walking in the footsteps of Jesus. But guess what Joseph did? In verse 9, verse 8, but he refused with me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. This is Joseph telling Potiphar's wife that he's been entrusted with everything in that house apart from Potiphar's wife, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Joseph did not want to sin against God. Why? He was walking in the footsteps of Jesus, isn't it? Because you can imagine, he is handsome, he has been entrusted everything. The master is not even concerned about what he is doing. But here is Potiphar's wife who wants to sleep with him, but he has refused. Literally. Nata agelala na yeye, Potiphar hangejua. Si Potiphar alikuwa na shughuli zake. Alikuwa naenda matrips, hayuko kwa nyumba. So they are just the two of them. But Joseph, because of the fear that he had about God, he did not agree to fall into Potiphar's wife's trap. So, and we see God protecting Joseph. And eventually, Potiphar's wife was not able to lure him into bed, and she hatched a plan. She said she wanted to rape Joseph. Can you imagine? A woman is the one who wants to rape a man. A 17-year-old boy. Haya, ebuona vile mnaniangalia na macho. That was Potiphar's wife. It is in the Bible. It is in Genesis chapter 30. It is not teacher Dolly who said that. It is written in Genesis chapter 38. And so, akachukua, alikuwa na cloak. I think ni kagoti. Akamwachia, and he ran away. Boy, Joseph, boy shout. He ran away. Akamwachia nini? Akamwachia cloak. And so Potiphar's wife used that to accuse Joseph. And he said that Joseph wanted to sleep him by force, with her by force. Imagine. Na yeye ndiye alikuwa ameleta nini? His story. So what happened when Joseph was said to the king? He was put into prison. Isn't it? Joseph put into prison. Not because of something wrong he had done, but because he upheld his values and he walked in the footsteps of Jesus, and he did not allow Potiphar's wife to put him into sin. And so he's in the prison. Guess what? Again, when he goes to prison, in Genesis chapter 40, he had favor with God. Imagine he was made the leader, evil too. You see what happens when you walk in the footsteps of Jesus. And he was jailed in the jail where the king's people were jailed. Watu wenye wamekosea king, kwenye walikuwa wanawekwa jail, that is where Joseph was put. So you can imagine alikuanga na wale ni kama amewekwa maximum prison, kwenye kuna wahalifu sugu. But Joseph had favor with the warden, with the prison's warden. And he was promoted. He was given a responsibility to be in charge of everybody else. See, another lesson we learned from walking in the footsteps of Jesus, there is protection. He was protected from our wahalifu sugu. And while in prison, 2 prisoners, a cupbearer and a baker, that were jailed because they had wronged the king, had dreams, almost similar dreams. And Joseph interpreted the dreams for them. And one of them was released and was reinstated. Actually, vile Joseph had interpreted, it was exactly what happened. One was killed, one was released. The cupbearer was reinstated to his job. And so, when he was returned to his job, he told the cupbearer, please, when you go back, don't forget me. But the cupbearer, alisahau Joseph. Joseph in prison. But God's presence was with Joseph. And then what happened? In chapter 40, hizo verses za na huku mbele. And when you go home, please read, because we are doing it, we are skimming it. And then the following lessons, we will go now discovering them in details, okay? So I'm just skimming for today. And when one time the king had a dream, okay? And when the king had a dream, the cupbearer is when he remembered Joseph, because Joseph was walking in the presence of God. And even when he was forgotten by the cupbearer, he did not complain. He just stayed there, and he still continued trusting and loving his God. And he had discernment, he had wisdom. But when he was called, he was summoned by the king, there's something that he said. He said to the king in Genesis chapter 40, he said to the king, let me go to 40. There's something that he told the king. Yeah, it's 41, sorry. When Joseph was summoned and he went to the king, verse 12, 41 verse 12. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And the things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream. Okay, he narrated the dream to Joseph. But verse 16 is where our catchline is. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh. But God will give Pharaoh the answers he desires. Tell your neighbor, God will give Pharaoh the answers he desires. So we see Joseph, even when he's from prison to now the palace, he's still walking in the footsteps of God. And he is not boasting, mimi, mpaka mfalme ananiita mimi, nikatafsiri dream yake. Hapana, he was still humble. He was still that boy who walked in the footsteps of Jesus. He had no bitterness in him. No matter how long he was in that prison, and for sure he was not in that prison because he had done anything wrong, but because somebody had set him up. And remember, even being in a foreign country, because your brother sold you, and you still have that humility. And so when he approached Pharaoh still with humility. And he told Pharaoh, it is God who is going to translate the dreams for you. And then Pharaoh narrated the dreams, and Joseph advised him. And Joseph was elevated to the position of a governor. Can you figure out that small boy, 17 years old, in a pit, being mishandled by the merchants and the slave traders, again going to Potiphar's house and being mistreated by Potiphar's wife? Because you can imagine, you are there and you are an employee and you are a foreigner and you've been given a responsibility by your boss, but there is sexual harassment by the wife of the boss. Hello? He was not in a good position, isn't it? So alikuwa nakaa anashtuka. Ni ile unalala kama umefuga mlango na kiti. Because anytime this woman can strike, isn't it? And then again, you're put into prison and there's nothing bad you have done. But he continued walking in the footsteps of Jesus. And to summarize, he was elevated to the position of a governor. What a faithful God we serve. What a mighty God we serve. And in conclusion, we find God's provision. In everything that Joseph touched, God blessed it. God provided for Joseph. He restored Joseph. He gave him peace. He gave him favor. He blessed him and he elevated him. He was promoted. He was given such a great promotion. So what do we learn from that? As I conclude, we learn that in the presence, in the footsteps of Jesus, there is protection, there is provision, and there is promotion. Hello? Protection, provision, and promotion. We've covered 4 P's, 4 scenarios: in the pit, in Potiphar's house, in prison, and in the palace. And in all those 4 scenarios, we've seen God's presence. We've seen God's presence. We've seen God's provision. We've seen God's protection, and we've seen God's provision. Are we together?